All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second meeting in April, which is also our budget meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please read the adequate notice of compliance statement?
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the City Clerk's Office in preparation of the Council Annual Meeting Notice dated January 3rd, 2019, which was properly distributed and posted per statutory requirements. Please be advised that fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room. The City has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter.
Thank you. I will just say that for myself, it's very hard for me necessarily to know whether I'm screaming to you, which I'm not intending, but it's hard to hear over these fans, right? So I'm not trying to scream, but I want to make sure that folks in the audience can hear us. So if you guys can't hear us, just, yell out, hey, I can't hear what the heck you guys are saying. So that's fine. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here.
Ms. Little?
Here.
Mr. McTiernan?
Here.
Mr. Bartan?
Here.
President Naidu.
Here. I would like to now call on Zach and Ben to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Come on up, boys.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the notices regarding, would you please read the notices regarding closed session and hearings and comments?
Yes. A closed session meeting is authorized by state statute, was announced and held prior to the start of this meeting, and the known items for discussion were listed on the published closed session agenda. Please be advised that council meetings are broadcast live on Comcast Channel 36 and Verizon Channel 30, and rebroadcast on Thursdays and Saturdays on Hometown TV, on Comcast Channel 36 and Verizon 33. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, spell your last name, and speak into the podium microphone so that your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or council member reads from a prepared statement, please email a copy to the City Clerk's Office at rlicatis@cityofsummit.org. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to approximately 3 minutes or so in length. Unless you are using an electronic device to follow the meeting agenda or need it for professional emergency contact purposes, please turn it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to minutes for approval. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of regular and closed session of April 2nd, 2019?
I move to approve them. I second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? Okay. Mike abstains. Marjorie, you abstain as well?
Abstain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to reports. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see so many people here, so welcome. Last night, the Planning Board unanimously voted that the proposed redevelopment plan is consistent with the master plan. On May 7th, the plan will be up for adoption by the Common Council. As has been stated before, the redevelopment plan does not contain specifics of the ultimate redevelopment, but rather it is a framework for the redevelopment agreement, which will be negotiated between the city and one or more developers. The City of Summit's annual Earth Day cleanup is on Saturday, April 27th from 9 to 12. Members of the community, individuals, and groups are encouraged to participate and help beautify Summit's parks and open spaces. The cleanup is sponsored by the City of Summit Environmental Commission and is conducted in partnership with the Washington Area Association. Individuals and walk-ins are welcome at Bryant Park and Martinsbrook Park. Children ages 12 or younger must be accompanied by a parent or other adult. Students in grades 8 to 12 without an adult, please email the Environmental Commission at summitearthdaycleanup@gmail.com for a permission form. Participants are asked to bring work gloves and a beverage in a reusable container. Bags for collecting trash and recycling will be provided. Community service hours are available. In the event of heavy rain on Saturday, April 27th, the Earth Day cleanup will be held on Sunday, April 28th from 1 to 4 p.m. Weather updates will be posted on the City of Summit website, that's cityofsummit.org, if necessary. On Saturday, May 4th and May 5th, from 8 until 4, the PAL will host its annual fishing derby at the Municipal Golf Course, 189 River Road. The pond will be fully stocked with trout. Admission is free, but participants need to bring rods and reels. Bait will be available for sale, but free hot dogs and sodas will be provided by the PAL. This has been going on for over 60 years. Many residents, families, and over for generations go there, and I'm quite certain that now that Councilman Vartan is not busy campaigning, he will be there with his mother and grandfather.
Sounds good.
Also on Saturday, May 4th, the DCP is hosting the Leveling the Playing Field event at Cornog Fieldhouse from 8 to 5. Please bring used sports equipment to share with other young athletes. Did you know that 1 in 5 low-income families are unable to get their kids involved in organized sports due to the rising equipment expenses? As a result, underserved children are 3 times less likely to participate in sports than their peers. All donated equipment will be given to low-income families. And that's it, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to our City Administrator, Michael Rogers. Michael.
Thank you, Council President. On Monday, April 29th, construction will begin on Pine Grove Avenue, which we're calling Section 1, which is Springfield Avenue to Blackburn Road. Work is to include the reconstruction of storm inlets, manholes, installation of curbing where none exists, repair of sidewalk, and finally milling and paving of the road. The project is expected to last about 2 to 3 weeks. Repaving work started on the portion of Springfield Avenue adjacent to City Hall, which we're actually doing more of the curb and sidewalk work at this point. It's a reconstruction of the entire length of the sidewalk along City Hall, new curbing, and a new layout that will provide space for city vehicles. The concrete work will be completed by the end of next week, with the final paving at the end of May. The entrance of the City Hall parking lot on Springfield Avenue will be constructed as part of the project and will be closed for a couple of days during this time. Work will begin at 8 a.m. and last throughout the day. One lane on Springfield Avenue will remain open at all times during construction, except for paving. The city's Arbor Day will be celebrated this Friday, April 26th at Lincoln Hubbard Elementary School at 10:45 a.m. Each year, the governing body recognizes the Arbor Day by celebrating with the planting of trees on public property. This year, the city will celebrate its 23rd year as a Tree City USA by planting a Kwanzaa cherry tree. City Forester John Linson will be there to give a brief presentation to attending students at Lincoln Hubbard, just on the history of Arbor Day in the United States, the importance of preserving trees in our community, and the value trees have in our everyday lives. Students will receive tree seedlings to plant in celebration of Arbor Day. And the last reminder, Summit Free Market dates are this Saturday, April 27th, and next Saturday, May 4th, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Summit Transfer Station. And that's all I have for this evening. Council President, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. For my Council President's report, I want to talk about the recent incident that was reported by the Board of Education concerning the swastika in the middle school. As many of you know, in December, Council and the Mayor unanimously issued a statement condemning such hateful symbols as well as hateful language. We said at that time that this has no place in Summit, and that while incidents such as this may have been ignored in the past, we will not ignore them now. The swastika is a symbol of an ideology. It is an ideology that strips an individual of his or her common humanity. It allows barbaric acts to take place because the individual no longer is thought of having any feelings, emotions, dreams, or ideas. Instead, the individual becomes only a member of a group, the other. Well, here in Summit, I firmly know that this community rejects such a view forcefully. And while I'm not naive enough to think that condemnation will stop those who are misguided or malicious, speak out we must. 76 years ago today, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was occurring. For those of you who are not familiar with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Jewish community, the remnant of the Jewish community that was left in Warsaw, decided to stand up when they could on April 19th, the beginning of Passover, to hold off deportations to the death camp of Treblinka. They held the SS for nearly a month, which was longer than most armies did in Europe. We would do a great disservice to such sacrifice and bravery if we did not confront those who continue to use the swastika. Hate has no home in Summit. Not today, not tomorrow, not in the future. And I firmly believe that as a community, we need to and we will do what is necessary to confront it, fight it, and defeat it. Thank you. Moving on to presentations. We have a presentation tonight about the Sidewalk Master Plan update, which, for those of you who are not familiar, back in February, we had a presentation from Aaron Schrager, our city engineer, about a sidewalk master plan, which has subsequently been posted on the city's website. At that time in February, what I had said to council members was that we were going to have a discussion in April about any comments or questions or issues that folks had with the sidewalk master plan. To put the sidewalk master plan in context, when we had the master plan process that occurred back in, now we're in 2019, in 2016 and 17, one of the big things that came up is that folks in this community wanted to have the ability to have connectivity between different areas without necessarily having to drive in their cars. The other big issue that came up was also the issue of safety, that people felt that there was a lot of speeding, that they didn't feel safe walking on the streets and so forth. The idea of a sidewalk master plan is that rather than an ad hoc fashion coming up with where sidewalks should be, that we would look at comprehensively where sidewalks would need to be placed, and then as the city went ahead and did road work in future years, that we would know where sidewalks would be placed, so this way they would be comprehensively laid out. And so that was what the plan is. That's what the plan is being proposed. That is on the website. I encourage those of you who have not looked at it to look at it. But tonight what we will do is have a chance for the council members who have been intimately involved in helping in developing this with his, which is the chair of the safety committee, Marjorie Fox, the chair of the, the chair of the safety committee, Greg Vartan, the chair of the infrastructure committee, Marjorie Fox, to let them start to lead the discussion with the other members of their committees as well, and then also to the extent that Aaron wants to have any other additional information, he can pipe in. And then for those of you who are here tonight but have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you because this is an interactive kind of idea. So I'll turn it over to Marjorie to start us off, I think.
Thank you, Council President. So as the Council President said, we had a presentation in February, and since that time, the engineers have sought comments from members of Council. The comments have really been restricted mostly to adding a couple of streets to the document. The Safety and the Capital Projects Committees have been working on sort of moving this forward. One of the things that I'll let Councilmember Vartan talk about is the Safe Routes to School survey, which he has been spearheading through the Safety Committee. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing. The Safe Routes to School that you've probably seen in the back of your elementary school handbooks is 10 years old at least. So it's time for an update. There have been some changes in terms of how people get to school and some of the walking patterns we think, and we're trying to get that information. So I'm going to let Councilmember Vartan talk about that. The other issue that I think is still topmost in our minds is how to fund sidewalks. So we, under our city ordinance, are allowed to assess for new sidewalks. We assess homeowners. There has not been an assessment since 2009. So we are at this point, there's basically at most two homeowners who might have one payment left on an outstanding assessment. So this is a good time for us to start thinking about, do we want to go forward with allowing assessments in the future on homeowners, or do we want to go with a policy where the city picks up the tab for that? The homeowners are still responsible for maintaining sidewalks, which includes shoveling, any maintenance if they're not properly maintained, replacing them. So those responsibilities still would fall on the homeowners, but there has been some thought that Sidewalks are a public amenity and ought to be, the cost ought to be shared amongst the public as a whole rather than just the homeowners in front of their houses. So that's that's one of the issues that I think we need to discuss as a council, how we want to handle this. The way the ordinance is written, council through the Safety Committee and the Capital Projects Committee can waive the funding right now, the funding assessment requirement right now. But it's on a case-by-case basis. And the question is, do we want to go forward that way, or do we want to just make a blanket policy about how we fund sidewalks? So with that, should we have that discussion, or would...
I think it makes sense for Councilman
Greg.
Barton
Sure.
to add.
Yes.
I'll be very quick. So first of all, thanks to Amy Cairns for helping with the survey. Thanks also to Superintendent Chang and the PTO presidents for being willing to let us circulate this survey. I think it's going to be really helpful. So please, when you get the opportunity, take the survey that discusses how your kids get to and from school, the challenges that they may or may not face along the way, and whether the routes that are currently in the plan make any sense. So the way that we've been going about this sidewalk plan, as Councilwoman Fox described, is, I think, really deliberate. We're not just saying, here's all sidewalks on every street. You know, I think it's a balanced approach, and I think that the ability for the city to fund, as we're doing the other road projects, is really critical. So that's all that I have to add on that. We can move on with the rest of.
Okay. I want to see if there are members of council that want to have any comments or ideas and thoughts. I know some folks, including myself, have given ideas for different roads that I think when we have gone walking door to door, residents on the roads have said, well, it would be nice if we had a sidewalk because of how fast cars are going down the streets. So I think that's been already done as part of the process. Right, Aaron? You've gotten additional roads. But I wanted to open it up. Does anybody on council have any additional thoughts, questions, issues? Marjorie, Councilwoman Fox raised the issue of financing. I think it's an important question of does anyone have thoughts on that? Councilman Booth.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for Marjorie and Greg for doing this, for championing this survey. I think the sidewalks are really important in terms of connectivity, and I am a strong proponent for not charging homeowners for them. So I think that's one way to get these done fast and get them in, and that's what I'm for.
Councilwoman Little.
I agree. When I first moved to Summit 16 years ago, I think there was a different mindset around sidewalks, and there was some pushback in installing sidewalks at that time, and even in my own neighborhood. Since that time, I feel like we've come full circle, and in walking neighborhoods and talking to residents, talking to my own neighbors, I think there's a general feeling that people want sidewalks now, and there is definitely it's definitely seen as an amenity to be able to walk into the downtown, to walk, to be outside, to not use cars as much. I mean, there's kind of come a full circle in our community, and I've heard that, from corner to corner around Summit, that's what people want. In addition, attending the American Planning Association, looking at the future of what's coming in cities, what's desirable, looking at trends, what people want to see, when they're buying homes, when they're looking at communities, walkability and ease of access to downtowns and amenities in the town is definitely a crucial trend. So in terms of property values and how to position the city for the future, I think this is really important, as was referenced in the master plan, and I would agree that it's a community benefit rather than an individual benefit, so it makes sense to assess it and to do it along with the road work. Talking about, this Pine Grove construction project would be in that sense, that when we were doing the roads and the milling and the paving, we would also add sidewalks where they were appropriate given the master plan, and that makes sense to me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Steve.
Yeah. Basically, I agree with everything that's been said here, contingent on that we're not going to be digging up any property without having road work being done at the same time, But I also want to focus on making sure that all the schools are a priority, with as a, as a priority. I mean, if we're going to be encouraging these kids to be walking to and from school, those walking blocks or walking routes, if you will, need to be focused, not just kind of placed in. And then also making sure that we don't kind of crisscross, as we were kind of talking about, cross streets. Have it all one side, one continuous line versus crisscross, if you will. So let's be prudent on that side.
Yeah. I mean, obviously on that latter point, that's something that may require in some instances, depending on what the engineering availability of roads and things like that. I mean, I think we have to give some discretion to our engineers to figure that stuff out. But I wholly agree that the school routes should be the focus initially. But as the road work goes, we need to put them in those places that are appropriate. With that, unless there's somebody, oh, Mike, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think the general tone and what we're trying to do makes complete sense. I guess around the funding of it, I've gone back and forth about this a lot in my head. And, the reality is sidewalks, they cost money. And to Councilman Gould's point, I think we would love to get sidewalks in where they need to go. But if the city's picking them all up, adversely, it probably is going to take longer to do that than if the people who are putting the sidewalks chipped in some money to pay for it. That's just a fact. We have limited money, limited ability to borrow, and an extra source of funding for that in a lot of ways would actually probably speed the process of getting sidewalks in place rather than hindering it. I agree. I think a lot to what others have said up here. Sidewalks, I think now are viewed more as an amenity. They're something that people want to have. And from that perspective, usually when people want something, they're willing to pay for it. There is also a fairness thing too. A lot of the sidewalks are built in town for the most part by people in their homes paying for the sidewalks in front. And we're saying, okay, thanks for that, but going forward, everyone gets a free sidewalk on everybody else's dime. So I go back and forth about this because, obviously if the sidewalk goes in front of your house, you're not the only one using it. It's benefiting a lot of people in the neighborhood, and because it is a safety issue, we do want to make sure that, particularly for schools, that kids have a very safe way to get there. And safety is that's one thing that government should be focused on. But again, I go back and forth around whether it is equitable for everyone to pay for this. So I'm still thinking about it, to be honest.
No, Nora, please.
I just want to say, I can understand your point because there are two sides. And then you have some people that, yes, I think the general overall mood in the town is to have more sidewalks, but there are still some folks who don't want them. And even if the city paid for it, they don't want to upkeep the sidewalks. They don't want to shovel. They don't want to maintain them. So it's not all clear cut, in my opinion. But I do want to make the important point that I hope that all the parents out here fill out those surveys and get your friends, pardon me, and other parents to do it too, because the safe walking routes to school, in my opinion, is the biggest priority, and I think that's what all you're hearing from council members as well. So, but we really need your information, and it's short. I think it's 8 questions, and if you get that to us, I think it would really help make sure that we have a plan that makes sense for the people that are using the sidewalks for school. That's it.
Thank you. Marjorie.
I just wanted to follow up on Councilman Tiernan's comment about the fairness with the assessments. One reason that we're having this conversation now is because it's been 10 years since we've done an assessment. And the fairness issue becomes much more complicated if we do an assessment this year and then decide we want to change the policy, and then you've got a group of people who just last year are being asked, they've had to pay, and how do you handle that? We're at a very nice position right now where there hasn't been an assessment in 10 years. So it's a very clean time. Yes, there are people historically who've paid, but there's no one currently paying out those fees. So I think, if there is a time to jump, I think this is it. So that's the only point I'd like to make on that.
Can I ask a question? When we, and I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
When we do walking routes, school routes, do we, and we determine they have to be there, do we, do the owners pay for that, or is that just a city cost?
So, just to add to what Councilwoman Fox had said, we haven't.
You gotta just speak up,
just-
Aaron,
Okay.
because of the noise. in the back.
Just to add to what Councilwoman Fox had said, we haven't done an assessment for new sidewalk where sidewalk hasn't existed in 10 years. That said, we have not really added an abundance of sidewalk over the last 10 years because of some of the logistics, and quite frankly, in the first half of that 10-year period, there wasn't an appetite for it. So the way the policy is written, which is Section 1811 of our ordinance, does give the city the ability to encumber the cost if it's on a school walking route. So right now, there is a mechanism in place for us to do so if we wanted to fund it.
Okay, thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Council President. No, that's a great point that Councilwoman Fox made, and I do agree with that. It would be much more difficult if we were starting this and then change the rules a year after we had done a bunch of sidewalks. But fairness goes beyond that, too, I think. There are some parts of town that aren't going to get sidewalks. They just, whatever four corners of them are, they're far away from schools, or they're not on walking paths, or and those people are not going to benefit a lot from sidewalks either. So, and not to say, you know, that we do a lot in town where we, for the public good, you pay, like the school system. Only 40% of people use the schools, and everyone pays taxes for it. But again, it is something that I wrestle with.
Yeah. It is not an easy issue. I think this is why, you know, prior councils, if they considered it, you know, went one way. But I think this is the opportunity that we have now to think through it, come up with what works best for 2019, and we'll see where we go. Let me open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to talk, raise an issue, raise a concern, or have a question? Come on up. Yeah. Christina. Just state your name and
My name
where
is
you live.
Christina Amundsen. I live at 109 Larned Road in Summit. Sorry. Is it loud enough?
A little bit
Can you
louder.
hear me?
A little bit louder,
Just speak
Christina.
louder.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Old cheerleading voice. My name is Christina Amundsen. I live at 109 Larned Road. And I first met Aaron when sidewalks were put on my street. And I was involved in the original master sidewalk plan a million years ago. A couple of points that I wanted to make. In the olden days, there was a mechanism to share the payment 50-50 if it was a safe school route. I don't know if that's the case anymore, but that's something that we should look at because, you know, that helps, you know, the homeowner feel like they have to pay for these sidewalks on their property, but they also are getting something back from the city in acknowledgement that this is now being publicly used. So that's a half and half situation. The other question I wanted to raise is that many of the safe school routes involve county streets, and I don't know whether we ever end up paving county streets, and what is the mechanism to get the county, to put sidewalks on those, because that's important. I live near Mountain Avenue. I'm one of the corner properties, so I know lots of Mountain Avenue kids that walk all the way to the middle school, all the way to wherever, or the high school, and there are many places where there are no streets, sidewalks, So
Okay.
that's...
So on
Thank
the
you.
first point.
One last point
Oh,
is
sure.
that when we consider sidewalks, we of course have to consider the fact that environmentally, sidewalks compact the tree's roots, and so they are eventually causing the death of the tree, so we need to be careful about where we place the sidewalks, and that we need to give the tree roots space, and that's it.
Right. So just on the first point with regard to the 50-50, that is the issue being debated about funding. So the current mechanism is, aside from the exceptions that can be placed, is to have homeowners pay 50% and the city pay the other 50% for the installation of sidewalks. And the question that, and the proposal being made is that instead we would go to 100% city paid, that is tax, instead of having the homeowner, the specific homeowner in front of the, having the sidewalk in front of them pay for that direct cost. As to the county roads and sidewalks on county roads. Aaron, maybe you can shed some light.
Yes, the county, anything beyond the curb on a county road would be the city's responsibility. So when they do pave, they will replace the ADA ramps, but they will not do any additional sidewalk. They are welcome to new sidewalk within their right-of-way. It's just generally would be funded by the city.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Matt?
Sorry, I'll be really quick. My name is Matthew Cohen. I live at 22 Kings Hill Court. I just thought for some color on the issue, has there been any accidents in recent times with pedestrians being hit in Summit, like as far as the immediate safety concern? I just haven't heard of any. I just didn't know if that would speak to the immediacy of the, how much of a safety issue is going on. That's all.
Right, okay. Chief, if you have We
don't like to talk about that because then it jinxes everything, so thanks for that. So, every year they've been going down, and a lot of times I gave the pedestrian report in November, where off the top of my head, let's say it was 13, but that was 2 gentlemen at the car wash that were hit by a car. So when you hear like 13 pedestrian accidents, it might not be like the ones you envision, getting hit and like flying through the air. It could be a mother driving over a son's foot in the King's parking lot. That by law is a pedestrian hit. We had a young man ride his bicycle out and hit a car. That's a pedestrian in a sense. So right now with the sidewalks, that's always going to be a better. I grew up in California. Everyone had sidewalks. That's where you learn to ride the bikes. You walk. It was great, a great asset. But right now, our numbers are, we'll say, good. So we hope to do that. But that isn't just the police department. It's the residents. Everybody's slowing down, not trying to get from A to B to C in 5 minutes. It's, leaving a little earlier. Paying attention. It's also pedestrians not looking at their phone and just walking across. If you go downtown at rush hour, everyone's coming off the trains. They're used to, New York hustle and bustle, and they kind of think Summit's the same way. And they just walk out. And, it's a lot of, it could be a recipe for disaster. So we always ask everybody to slow down. We have a traffic unit that does a lot of great things. We had over 10,000 motor vehicle stops last year. But it's a team effort that everyone's got to slow down. So.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And I think for those of you who were following council last year, you know that the safety committee, the police department, we put in a lot of 4-way stop signs through town. There was also the blinking signs in specific corners where there was high incidence of potential for incidents. And so we've been trying to do different measures all together to try to reduce the possibility of having an incident. Okay, anyone else that wants to talk about the sidewalk issue before we go on to general public comments? Going once, going twice, okay. Now, on to public, thank you everyone, and we'll now consider the sidewalk master plan discussion basically done, and we can move forward with where we go from there. Moving on to public comments. Is there anyone who has, I think there's at least one person, I'm going to guess there's at least one person in this audience who has a public comment to make. So, but Lou, wait a second. Zach's going up before you, okay? So, but let me just state what I have to state, just so people know. If anyone that wants to make a comment that is not on something that's on the agenda for tonight, please come up, state your name, and if you have something written, please, when you finish, give it to Rosie. Okay, with that, Zach, come on. And Ben, come on.
Hello. So Zach Battistella, Battistella, 111 Cold Road.
Hi, I'm Ben Cohen, Cohen. I live at 22 Kings Hill Court.
Hello, my name is Zach Battistella, and I'm an 11-year-old at Franklin Elementary School.
And my name is Ben Cohen, and I'm also 11-year-old at Franklin Elementary School.
We are both Ideas Honor students at Franklin Elementary and became extremely passionate about helping our community while working on a class project. We began a project to restrict the use of single-use plastic in Summit and educate our community on the negative effects of single-use plastic. For example,
Did you know that an average piece of single-use plastic stays on this earth for an estimated 400 years and kills 4 animals? In my opinion, this is not worth something you use for an average of 15 minutes. We created a petition that reads, "I believe that single-use plastic should be restricted in Summit." We received 110 signatures on our petition so far online and in person in the matter of weeks, which shows us that people are interested in restricting single-use plastic. We ask you, the Common Council, to support us in our goal to restrict single-use plastic in Summit. We respectfully request that a law be proposed and later passed to reduce as much single-use plastic as possible.
Another goal we have would be to expand and publicize the Trex recycling program in Summit. Currently, there are only 3 Trex collection boxes that must be emptied twice a day because they fill up so quickly. This shows that there is a huge demand to recycle this plastic and need for more collection boxes. We also request that the Trex boxes stay in the same location so that people will build a habit to recycle their stretch plastic. Also, if Summit gets more Trex, the supply and demand of these boxes will reduce and need to empty them twice a day. We also think you, the Summit Common Council, could educate our community about this growing issue and about how the Trex program can help.
Thank you so much for your time. We truly do believe that these small steps will make a big change for our future and the future of our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
And also,
Let me just say to you guys, so we have started talking here about the issue of plastics, and we will have a presentation from the Recycling Advisory Committee about what we're thinking of doing, a step-by-step approach that they will be coming up with regard to dealing with plastics. This is a huge issue, not only for us and not only nationwide, but for the world. And I think it's great that you guys are speaking out about this. One of the things that we will be talking about is the budget, and I know many of you are interested in the budget. One of the issues that these guys are talking about is about recycling and plastics. I will tell you, looking in future years, not even very far down the road, but one of the big issues we're going to have is the cost associated with recycling products. We have to reduce our plastic use. The previous markets that existed for taking our recyclables do not exist anymore. That was primarily China. It just is not there anymore. And as a result, the costs associated with taking our plastics are going to double effectively for you, the taxpayers. Okay? That's what's coming down the road. There's just no way to avoid it. And the only way we're going to be able to deal with it as a community, as a society, is to reduce our plastic. So these guys are talking exactly what we need to, not just because it's green, because that's good for the environment. It is green because it's good for your wallets. And so I think it's really important. Thank you very much. Laura, do you want to add?
I just wanted to add one thing. I should have mentioned earlier that the Summit Farmers Market begins this coming Sunday and at April 28th at 8 to 1. And one of the things that the Summit Downtown Inc. and the Farmers Market Committee have decided to do is to ban single-use plastics from the farmers. So, and they gave them the notice last year. The farmers had all last year to get used to it. They'll be handing out lots of reusable bags, the bright red, you'll get them. And I think that's a big step. And there are, Nancy, 4,000 people that come to the market usually each an average of 4,000 people. So walking away with, let's just call it 2,000 bags, and that's going to be banned. So you guys are on the right track, and I really appreciate your being here tonight.
Hold on, Marjorie.
I just wanted to add, thank you both for your presentation. I think this was a great idea. I wanted to let you know that there are a few programs that are already starting, and they need lots and lots of helpers. So if you're willing to help go around to stores with some of the grown-ups on the committee, one of the things that the Recycling Advisory Committee has kicked off is a Skip the Straw campaign. So they've been working with the Environmental Commission and Green Summit on that, but they need lots of volunteers because they're going to all the restaurants in Summit and asking them and educating them on straws and maybe looking at alternatives. And we've gotten a lot of really good support, but it takes a lot of people. So if you guys are interested in helping with that, I think your moms may have already sort of gotten in touch with some of the people, but if not, I can help you get in touch with the people who are running that. And also just a general plastic education campaign that they're working on. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we would love to get you involved in doing that. And thank you for your concern.
thank you. We actually did talk to the chairman of the Environmental Committee a couple days ago.
Okay, great.
So
Terrific. Okay, great.
Okay, great, guys. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Lou, did you have a, come on up.
Nice reusable bag there.
Thank you. My name is Lou DeSocio, 17 Stiles Road, Summit, New Jersey. Madam Mayor, David, President Council, Council all. With kids like this can make my job a lot easier. I come to you on talking about the drug awareness problem we're having. We're having a tremendous problem in the state of New Jersey. It's a nation. Summit has its own problems. On May 5th at Echo Lake Park, we're going to have a walkout on drugs. I've asked the 7 lodges in my area to bring a speaker. I spoke to the DARE officer, and I also reached out to John Stort. I'd like to bring this attention to council. I have literature that I'll pass out. I'll give it to Rosie. And I'd also like to see as many parents to show up to this. We give out literature, coloring books, and this is our mascot, Elroy. And we hand this out to all the children. This is to get their attention. The bag is full with the crayons and the literature. The kids color, and we try to educate the parents. The whole idea is prevention through education. With children like this, my job will be done. It was a hard act to follow, thank you. But I really appreciate them doing, and just to let you know, I have a canvas bag.
Loved it, absolutely.
So I'd like to present this to the council.
Thank you. Come on up. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Lou.
Thanks.
You can keep the bag. I have plenty of canvas
Oh,
bags.
thanks. I'll leave it for Rosie.
I'll distribute this.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to come to this walkout on drugs, it's going to be at Echo Lake Park on Sunday, May 5th at 11:30. And we'll have speakers there. I know, I think the chief is going to help me out with somebody. Hate to put him on the spot, but I already spoke to the DARE officer, and he was very interested. And speaking to the first aid squad, I know they have their hands full with the Narcan. Sometimes they have to hit some persons twice in one day, and that's not acceptable.
Well,
So-
I know you are passionately care about this issue, Lou. You and I have spoken privately about it. I know this is a huge, huge issue for you, and I know that, and it is a epidemic that has hit this country. It's terrible, and I thank you for all that you have done, and the folks that you work with that have done in trying to educate folks about this issue and trying to make sure that that we try to stem the epidemic.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else have a public comment on something that's not on the agenda? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, that's end of the public comments. On to budget hearings. So we're going to have hearings on 2 resolutions. The first is the introduction of the municipal sewer and parking budget. And for those of you who, I'm going to give you a couple
Sorry,
of
no, this
seconds.
is the best part. Wait, this
who
is
don't
the
wanna
best
touch
part.
the
What are
budget.
we going to do?
Thanks, guys. Thank you guys for
you.
coming in. And for those of you who are sitting further back but want to move up closer, so we're not seeming like we're yelling, come on up front. And then we're going to have, the second one is the introduction of the Special Improvement District budget. So we'll open up the budget hearing, and the way that it works, just so folks can follow, I will ask the Finance Chair, Councilwoman Little, to introduce it. We'll have discussion by council members about the budget to the extent that they want to talk about it. Then I'll open it up for public comments. And then once the public comment period is over, then we will have any further discussion by members of council, and then we'll move along. Okay, so the first one is Resolution 38798. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
Council President, it's not
Oh, just your-
necessary to read
your
it. This
title.
is just opening the
Okay,
hearing
then
for...
Councilwoman Little, all yours.
Thank you, Council President. This is the introduction of our 2019 municipal sewer and parking budget. I hope everyone either was present or watched on TV the excellent presentation of the budget that was done by City Administrator Michael Rogers. As we've discussed before, and I hope that I'm not repeating myself too much, but I think it's worth mentioning, this is our 2019 municipal budget. A tremendous amount of work goes into this. And if any, I hope that everyone did look at the presentation by Michael Rogers and saw that the care and attention that goes into this budget. So I first want to thank City Administrator Rogers and Marge Gerba and her staff for all the work that goes into this. They really start working on this over the summer. It goes all through the fall, into the winter, and this is a tremendous amount of work, care, and thought goes into this budget, so I really want to thank you. I also want to thank the fellow members of the Finance Committee that are up here on the dais, Mayor Reyes, Council President Naidu, and Council Member Bowman, that we've all, spend time with all of you going through this budget, asking lots and lots of questions, having them answered, and going through this very carefully. As the Finance Committee, we have the privilege of also working with each of the department heads who present their individual budgets to us and come to us and explain what they want to accomplish over the next year and how they're going to do it in a really fiscally responsible manner. And this is the part that bears repeating that I've said before, I am continually impressed, I think all of us would say the same, by the care and attention and the dedication that each of these department heads go into providing these utmost quality of service to the residents of Summit, but doing it in a really fiscally responsible way and really paying attention and really carefully monitoring their budgets and their payments out to make sure that the residents are also not burdened with unduly burdened by their taxes. And it's really impressive. And I'm always impressed when you come to us with how much care and attention you put into that. So we are very proud of this budget. It's a 1% increase, which is well below the 2% cap, and very impressive given that the costs that are out of our control continue to rise every year that we've discussed. There is an increase in the capital budget this year that we've discussed. The largest portion of that is the fire station that we are looking to the future. It's part of the redevelopment plan. We did put this into this year's budget. The whole outlay for that will clearly not happen over the next year, but it is in the budget for the capital, looking forward to that. Without the fire station, the capital budget actually would have decreased. And I also want to point out that we have maintained our AAA credit rating from all 3 credit rating agencies, and we are the only municipality in the state of New Jersey to hold that high rating from all 3 credit rating agencies. So this is a very responsible budget. It addresses the future. It's setting Summit up in a great way to provide services, to look for the future, but also doing it in a way that is very fiscally responsible. And we're all grateful and proud of this, and I thank you, and would open it up to any questions.
Oh, Steve, you need to second, right? To open it up. Yeah.
Second.
Motion.
Oh,
You have to make a motion to open
I would
it.
move to open the hearing
Right.
at this point.
And I'll second that.
Okay, great. Now we have, anyone on council have, or mayor have any comments or thoughts? I will only add before we open it up to the public, this is, as Councilwoman Little said, first of all, thanks. I will not repeat all the thanks, but this is a tough process that we go through. It goes on for months. The capital portion of the budget process begins in a workshop in December. And then through January and February, different department heads come, while at the same time they've had internal conversations with the city administrator many, many times, I'm sure, go through what is feasible, what's not. And then we go ahead and pick apart their budget almost line by line and say, okay, why is this there and why is that there? We all appreciate the fact that we pay a lot in taxes. We all get it. We all pay it, so we all understand it. But we also appreciate the fact that we need to make investments. And this budget is an investment budget. And the reason I say that, as Councilwoman Little said, one of the biggest components of this budget that you see, and one of the drivers, or otherwise we probably may even have a flat budget, is dealing with setting aside the reserve associated with the construction for the new fire station. But the reason we're doing the new fire station, and the reason that we need to do it now, as far as putting the reserve, is because of sequencing that we need to have in place in order to do the Broad Street West redevelopment. We have to have a fire station before the current fire station could possibly be demolished. Otherwise, where's our fire trucks going to go and where are our firemen going to be, right? So we need to sequence properly and think through. And so in order to do that, last year's council unanimously approved, my recollection, was to spend money on creating the plans that are necessary, the designs that are necessary for construction of a fire station. Those plans and construction drawings will be done by the end of this year. In order to be able to have a fire station where our firemen could go by 2021, we need to be in a place where we go ahead and start putting in the reserves necessary for this year's capital budget. And this is why the way that it's shaping out to be. This was thought through, this was debated, talked about, do we need to do it this year, can it wait, so forth. But because we want to make sure that we do things right, and that we don't end up in a situation where we have developers waiting and we can't go through with projects because we did not decide to take the necessary steps, decided to do the budget that we did. Anyone want, it feels free to add if I get anything wrong or mischaracterize. Matt.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to point out one more thing. So everybody should open their book to page 2-13 of the 5-year trend section. But seriously, what we see here is that I always think that these trends are important because it gives you, it's sort of, in layman's terms, gives you what's our positive trends, what are negative trends. And one positive trend I'll point to in this budget is that the expenditure per capita has gone down by 1.84% this year, and it's a continuing downward trend, which means that we're doing more with less. So just to echo what Beth had said about the department heads, I feel that each of the departments is really trying, successfully trying, to do more with less.
And that's an excellent point, because I think we also have to recognize, if you look at the full-time employees, we have seen a steady trend in the decrease in the number of full-time employees. And that is a very important component, because as we all know, it's not only just having the individual that has the salary at that point in time, but it's also the benefits issue that go on the long term. And one of the things that we need to think about and we continue to think about, is how technology plays in reducing necessarily having either full-time or part-time employees, because we need to make sure that if we're investing in technology in the one hand, that we get a benefit, a potential benefit on the personnel side on the ledger. Okay. Anyone have any comments before I open up to the public? Mike, you?
I'll speak after.
Okay, fine. Okay, this is the time for public comments. If there's anyone from the public that would like to speak about the budget, this is your opportunity to speak.
Maybe some capital expenditure and air conditioning would be suitable next year, but anyhow, I'll leave that to you. My name is Steven Spur. I live at 61 Woodland Avenue. I just wanted to draw attention to 2 points related to the firehouse, the Chief's new firehouse, which we're excited about. Regarding the $11.8 million figure. So I think I was one of the 2 members of the general public that was at that capital budget hearing in December, which was great. So thank you for that. I looked back at the presentation earlier today. Just want to get a sense from either Michael or members of council, is that number still a realistic estimate of total expenditure? I remember discussion at that December meeting about outfitting for the building, electronics, furnishings, things of that matter, chemical showers we were talking about at that point. Obviously, we can always add a little bit later. Is that correctly scaled? And then the second question I have is, with that $11.8 million plus the $1.5 million for the 7-seater acquisition, are we expecting concessions on this scale with the redevelopment process? Understanding we don't have a developer decided, we don't have a plan in place. Are we getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, or are we scaled appropriately? If that makes sense. So I'll welcome any comments if you can.
Yep, absolutely. I think both questions make sense. I'll defer to whether Michael or the chief wants to talk about where they have a sense of the overall budget for the fire station.
So my assessment of where we are in the process of the new firehouse construction, the chief, as well as many other members of his team, as well as the architects that we have under procurement to get us through the design and construction specification phase. We are going through that process. We had an estimate provided by the same architect. I think there is some value engineering that's going to go through, and we'll get it to a place, and I'll let the chief comment after this of what his thoughts are, but I think the goal is to certainly stay within that number, all in, not just up to drywall, but beyond, and that includes all any other equipment that needs to be fitted out and so forth in the new firehouse. As far as the getting ahead of herself, I think we're behind, but that's just my personal opinion. With regard to 7 Cedar Street, that was a rare opportunity that we got to get control of a critical piece of property within the redevelopment area, and we were very fortunate to get control of it. So the more property we have under control, the more we control our destiny in that redevelopment area, and certainly don't provide for an opportunity for other potential buyers of that property to capitalize on that and create higher cost issues within that redevelopment area to, certainly affect the municipality in any future discussions around potential pilot agreements and so forth. So those are my thoughts, Steve, about
Thank
it.
you, Mike.
Chief, would you like to just comment where we are?
Council President Mayor, yeah. So basically, just real quick, the question before was what's included, $11.8 million. So when you do a project of this magnitude, there's something called programming. Basically, it looks at what the fire department currently has and what we need to meet industry standards, and also looking into the future where the fire station is going to be. So basically, everything that was included in $11.8 million is based upon our current operations and what we needed. Basically, something that if it's not screwed to the wall, really wasn't hardly included in the budget. It's a lot of things like extra furnishing, some equipment for fire safety. Those things may be done separately. But as we go through this phase now, design development, we're actually working with the architects, and our internal project management team is working to go through every single part of the firehouse, room by room, look at what's included in the budget, and look at what can be adjusted. And as we go through this, we're program engineering it, so we're constantly trying to stay on track with that budget. The goal is to come under it. So as we go through this, we're actually looking at it detail by detail. And at the end of the day, there will be some things that are not included, and a lot of things we may take from our current building. A lot of people have approached us to do some fundraising on the side, so we're hoping with the capital and also with funding opportunities, we'll be able to include everything that we need to occupy that building. As far as timing-wise goes, I will concur with Mike Rod. I think we are behind on it. It's going to take us about 18 months to build a firehouse once we break ground. So right now, if we continue on the path we're at now, we're probably pretty close to that 2001 deadline. But like I said, our goal is to go out to bid by the end of this year, and hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, building in early 20, to hopefully meet that goal by having everything done, moved in by sometime in 2021, which kind of coincides with the whole Broad Street West redevelopment plan. So.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Let me answer the second question as I understand it, and I think what I would say is this is the budget, but this is not an approval to go ahead and construct $11.8 million. That still has to come later. During the next, we will have, as the mayor just previously said, the planning board just approved last night the Broad Street West redevelopment plan. It will now come back to council in the first meeting in May. We will then review it and presumably approve it, but we'll see how the votes go. Can't presume anything, right? And so assuming that it's passed, at that point in time, we will end up having to designate certain 1 or 2 or more developers, and we will end up doing negotiations with those developers, during which point in time we will then have a much better understanding of what the financials are, or what ultimately is the cost benefits associated with it. And so we're on a road, but the road still has off-ramps, and we understand what those off-ramps are. Okay? So we understand where we're going with this. Okay. Anyone else have any comments, questions this is your opportunity to ask about the budget. Going once, going twice. Okay, we're going to move on to the next hearing, which is Resolution 387099, which is...
Excuse me, Council
Oh, I'm sorry.
President.
I'm sorry.
I just-
I'm sorry. I didn't allow council members to go. I'm sorry. I forgot. Now that the public comment period is over, any council members that have any further comments, please go ahead. Mike, do what?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Yeah, so kudos to everyone involved, particularly the Finance Committee. I know how hard you worked, so thanks for all your hard work, Councilwoman Little, as well as Marge and your whole staff, and all the department heads, and Michael as well, obviously. This is a long, arduous process. I think a lot of the numbers do speak for themselves. Certainly, it's not easy to continue to control costs when, as Councilwoman Little mentioned, costs go up all the time. They do. So it's difficult, and everything is a trade-off. One thing I do worry, though, and there's so many moving pieces with this redevelopment plan, with big capital expenditures that are on the horizon. We're going to start to, we're starting to pay debt service on the community center, for instance, now that it's almost built, which is great. We've benefited over the last couple of years. Like last year, we had the agreement with Atlantic Health, where we were able to get an extra $750,000 for the next several years. That, as much as anything, I mean, there was a ton of hard work that went into the budget planning, but we had a flat budget as partly because of the math that we were end up getting that extra money. This year, I think to the good work that our parking services area has done with Rita, managing our debt load, the Broad Street garage is finally paid off. You usually have a party when that happens, right? You rip up the mortgage and things. But that's an extra $400,000 that is now available to the city. And if you look through the budget, the contribution from parking services to the city government has gone up because we don't have that debt load. I worry, though, how many times are we going to have that kind of money that, it's not found money, people work hard for it and stuff, but it, the last couple of years, our numbers have looked good because we've actually been able to find revenue where revenue didn't exist prior. And we know, parking, unlike what Elon Musk says, where there's going to be driverless cars everywhere next year, I seem to doubt that that's going to happen, but we're going to have need for parking. And so that budget, if we were to ever, and who knows what's going to happen with Broad Street West redevelopment, but if we're ever kicking in again for that capital expense there, that money gets drawn back out of the municipal budget. And we, maybe a lot of the math works with the redevelopment if we're doing pilots. That's great for the city, and maybe we can get there in the next couple of years. But if we're doing pilots, that means the school system doesn't get that revenue. And as we all know, they have pressure on their budgets too. So this is hard. I congratulate the Finance Committee and Michael and all the department heads, but we have to stay focused, about staff, smart investments in technology, where we can save money. We talk about revenue on the other side of it. This is why, when we think about things like sidewalks, for instance, it matters because our budget is going to really, really be stretched, I think. It's not going to get any easier. In fact, I think the next couple of years, it's going to get harder. Next year, we have, is the last year for our Celgene agreement, where that rateable is going to go down and finally bottom out. And hopefully we'll get some upside from that going forward, but that's not going to kick in right away. So, these are things that we really have to keep our eye on the ball and keep the pencil sharp. So.
Mike, I agree with you. I share your concerns about the debt servicing. I share the concerns about what we're doing as far as, we have to look at technology, we have to look at personnel, we have to look at where we can do more shared services with other communities. I know we have done a really good job. We did merger with the court in the last few years system in order to reduce costs. We need to continue to think through these issues. We have, and as I said before when we were talking about recycling, we have the issue of a recycling contract that will have an increase in cost. And I agree with you about the Atlantic Healthcare Agreement, something, again, that's out there. But on the other hand, we can control what we can control. And I think what we have done the last few years, certainly, is try to focus on making sure that the level of service that people expect in this town are there. Because on the flip side, right, is if we don't invest in roads, if we don't invest in traffic safety, if we don't invest in those things that sustain our property values, how else are we going to be able to do anything? Everybody here, most people here, have a stake in this community because they have a huge financial investment in this community. It's not merely just because you live here, it's because your largest asset is probably here. And therefore, we as a city have an obligation to do those things to ensure that we don't devalue that asset of yours. Because when you want to go ahead and sell and retire or take a second mortgage or whatever you want to do, you need to be able to draw on that asset. And so how we balance these budgets is a challenge. It's a difficult challenge. But one of the things that we have as collectively, and this is not just this year or the prior year, but for years now, at least since I've been on council, we've been talking about Broad Street redevelopment. And part of the reason is we need to grow the pie. We can grow the pie and grow investment in this town. And thankfully, we saw last year $25 million of increased investment in town. 2 years ago or whatever, and then last year we saw another almost nearly $10 million of investment in this town. As you drive around this town, you see construction going up. I will tell you that we created the Economic Development Committee last year. And one of the things, looking at the Economic Development Committee, one of the things they're looking at is looking at neighborhood business districts outside of the downtown and seeing how we can maximize value in those areas. But one of the things that came out is that we have very high commercial rent rates. And part of the reason is because of where we're located and how desirable we are. We are competitive, if not more so, than Jersey City as a rent rate because people want to be here. We have a real demand for Class A office space in this town. If we can build it, people would come. So there's a lot of good things about where we are right now. We have to manage it properly. We have to be cautious. We have to be thoughtful, and we have to be responsible. But certainly, this budget achieves those goals. Nora, please.
Thank you, Council President. I agree with both of you gentlemen and things that you've said, with all of you actually. But I do want to just quickly add my thanks to Michael and the Finance Committee and all the department heads. But Council President, when you say that we have to look at sharing services, we have to look at ways to
I did
cut
not
costs.
mean to imply that we haven't.
Well, that's what I'm going to make that point.
I didn't mean to say
Michael Rogers, pardon me, and the department heads and members of council, pretty much at every committee meeting that I attend and in conversations with Michael and the staff, are always coming up with ways, things that we can think of to improve efficiency, to share services. I'm thinking about how about we do something like this, the idea to have Uber, then now Lyft for our commuters, what ways we can improve that. It's hard to know when you're in town, you're living in your home, you're doing your job, you're getting your kids to school, really what's going on inside this building. And frankly, I didn't really know until I was mayor in January of 2016. There's a ton of work that's done by the people that work here and by all the volunteers, and not just the volunteers that are up at this dais, but the head of the Environmental Commission, the Recycling Advisory. Those folks, along with Paul Cascase and Aaron Schrager, are really putting their heads together to find ways to save money and do our recycling more efficiently. So those are things that are happening truly all the time. And I understand. I've seen the budget. I've been on Finance Committee for these 3 years. I know that the money is tight, and we're working to spend every dollar to the extent that we can. But I am confident with the professionals that we have in this city and the people that volunteer who are also professionals. Maybe I'm a professional volunteer, but that we will do the redevelopment in a smart and sensible and carefully planned way. And I think that down the road, it is something that is beneficial. There are communities who don't do redevelopment in a very smart way, and it becomes a problem for them. That's not going to happen here. I firmly believe it because of the leadership and the professionals we have on our staff, and because we have a council that is very, very concerned and conservative in how we approach projects of this magnitude. This is one of the biggest things this city has done in a century, along with the firehouse. So it will take time, but if we do it right and carefully, it will redound to all of our benefits.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that that we haven't done it, but it is something that we need to continue to focus. I think it is look. There's only so many tools in the toolkit that we can use in order to reduce costs, and you can only raise revenue so much, and so you got to figure out ways of reducing costs. With that, anybody else? Okay. With that, I will consider the budget hearing on Resolution 38798 closed. Okay, moving on. 38799, Councilwoman Little.
Thank you, Council President. This is the introduction for the 2019 Special Improvement District budget. This is the budget for the Summit Downtown, Inc. And once again, I have some thanks. I want to thank Nancy Adams, the Executive Director, who is here, and Claire Toth in particular, who's the Treasurer for SDI. This budget has been very carefully considered and worked on, again, by the SDI. For those that don't know, the largest part of the revenues comes from assessment from the individual businesses within the Summit Downtown, Inc., along with revenues from the farmers market fees. And then the appropriations from that budget go to all the wonderful things that market and promote our downtown, making it really one of the healthiest and most successful downtowns anywhere in the area. We have a very low vacancy rate. We have tons of visitors that come to our downtown all the time, as well as, providing all of us with high property values, given that our downtown is so attractive. So some of the recent events have been the Design for a Day, which was very successful a couple weeks ago, and then Family Fun Night coming up. The Farmers Market again is starting this week. Arts and Cars is coming. All those great events are done by the Summit Downtown, Inc. And Nancy Adams is here to answer any questions and talk to the council about the budget.
Yeah. Thank you.
I second the
So
implied.
I would like to move this hearing open. I would like to move to open this hearing.
Thank you.
And I second it.
Thank you. Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? Okay. Any comments from the public? Nancy, would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Just very basically, I just want to say that, and given that you were just talking about the local economy and making it stronger, downtowns, while generally small in size, are the leading economic drivers in cities all over the country. I just was reading an International Downtown Association study that they did, talking about the economic impact that downtowns, while taking a very small percentage of the land in most municipalities, really generate your revenue. So you have commercial uses and office uses and retail and restaurant and residential, which you're hopefully growing sooner than later in Downtown Summit. So one of the things we don't receive any financial contribution from the municipal budget, from the general fund. We do work with a couple of your departments in downtown cleaning from the Department of Public Works and other agreements we have with DCS on hanging our banners, and that relationship works very well, picking up the garbage with the Clean Communities money, so that's grant covered. We are increasing the assessment on the commercial properties in the downtown district by 1%, and applying a lot of that money to enhancing existing events and growing new events. But the biggest excitement is for the beer and wine garden that we're just got state ABC approval for arts and cars, so I often joke that you think people can't drink beer at any other time because everyone is so excited about this on September 15th. So I guess drinking beer in a parking lot is just something more fun about it. But we're doing that, and we've, that's what that's for, a beer garden. So the facade grant program is another initiative that we've just started this year where we've funded grants. 2 of them are already pending for downtown businesses to improve or to help businesses that are moving or new businesses coming in with cost of doing a facade improvement. Ani Ramen may be adding a grant application for the mural on the back of their new restaurant. Zappia's Pizza is moving to Beechwood Road, and we're helping fund their new awning that they're replacing. And a lot of people will be happy to hear Beechwood Liquors at the corner of Beechwood and Union Place is replacing their awning, and we are also talking to them about, in order to get the grant that they are applying for, other improvements to the facade of that very visible location, so that it actually shows that they have some very high-end liquors and products inside, but you wouldn't know that from the bodega look on the outside. So we're trying to help him as well. So gift card program is the other thing that the board has dedicated itself and dedicated funds to. We don't make any money on the Visa gift card. It's strictly to keep money in the downtown district, and in fact, in this case, in all of Summit, since the card is accepted at about 125 businesses we have. King's just notified me that they also want to be onboarded, so Natal's, and Fiorino's, different businesses, not just in downtown, but around all of the city of Summit. So, and that's a way to keep money in Summit, keep people spending money at Summit businesses, and keeping the vibrancy that we currently have in downtown.
Thank you very much, Nancy. First of all, I'll just say that I know a few years ago, there seemed like many store vacancies, especially on the first floor. Now one does not get a sense at all that
Right.
there are that many. When you said Zappia's is moving, since we ordered there,
Zappia's Pizza.
Zappia's Pizza.
Not the deli.
Not the deli.
Deli stay on a Union
Okay.
Place.
Is it moving to the location where the
Shunju.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Is it doing? Okay.
Great.
They're renovating it now.
Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay.
So-
Does anybody have questions for Nancy? Okay. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak about the Special Improvement District budget? Okay. Thank you,
Everyone
Nancy.
loves
Thank you
it,
for
just
coming
like your
in.
budget.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of your budget increase. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion by members of council about the Special Improvement District budget? Okay. With that, I will close the hearing on that. Okay, moving on. We have ordinances for hearing. The first one is Finance 19-3187. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title of that ordinance?
An ordinance authorizing the acquisition of real property identified as Block 2706, Lot 4, on the tax assessment map of the City of Summit.
Okay, Councilman Little.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance authorizes the purchase of 7 Cedar Street, as we have discussed tonight already. This is a key part of the Broad Street West redevelopment area. It is a property that came for sale. It's behind the fire station. This allows the city to be well-positioned in the redevelopment process. I would also like to notice, we've noted in earlier hearings, that this is an income-producing property, which will continue after the purchase, and it will stay on the real estate rolls for the City of Summit. And I would like to open this for hearing.
I second it.
Okay. Any comments from members of council? Mike?
Yeah, just to add on to that, one of the attractions that we have heard from developers when they come and talk to us about Broad Street West is the percent of land that is owned by the city. This adds to that. So in a weird way, it gives the city more leverage in talking with developers, but it also makes it more attractive for developers because they know they can just come to, they have to go to more than one, but one player in the redevelopment, being the city, does control such a large percent, and it's just easier to come to agreements because these are, as people have alluded to, can be very, very complicated transactions before they end up seeing the light of day. So I wholly support this. It's odd when things work out the way they do, because in a lot of times when property is for sale, when there is redevelopment in the air, it can get fairly messy to try and to acquire property like this. So I do want to thank City Administrator Rogers. He worked really hard around getting all this laid out in a good way, and I think it's worked out for the city very well.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else? Let me just also add that I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said and what Councilwoman Little said. And this is a critical piece in the puzzle dealing with the Broad Street West. It so happened it came up. It remains a taxable property. It will stay in the tax rolls. It will continue to pay taxes while we're doing the Broad Street redevelopment process. It has tenants currently in it. And I want to thank Michael, who worked very hard, Steve, who brought this somewhat to our attention in order to get this done, really, and Matt for negotiating very quickly an agreement. I think probably everyone was surprised as to how quickly this thing, I think, started off somewhere, Steve, what, in February or February probably?
Yeah, probably the last week of February, I think.
And here we're sitting in the end part of April, and we have an agreement signed up. That is quick. There's no way around that. Any comments from members of the public? Okay. Any further discussion by members of council? Okay. With that, I'll consider this hearing closed. Okay. Ordinances for final consideration. Finance 19-3187. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
An ordinance authorizing the acquisition of real property identified as Block 2706, Lot 4, on the tax assessment map of the City of Summit.
Councilwoman Little.
Thank you, Council President. As we just had the hearing, this is the ordinance to purchase the property at 7 Cedar Street, and I move that we approve this ordinance.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Naidu.
Aye. Okay, moving on. Ordinances for introduction. We have one ordinance for introduction, 6408. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title of that ordinance?
An ordinance to establish the 2019 salaries, wages, or compensations of and for the officers and employees of the City of Summit in the County of Union and the State of New Jersey.
Councilman Little.
Thank you, Council President. As the clerk has just referenced, this ordinance is to establish salary ranges for all city employees, both union and non-union, and I move to introduce this ordinance.
I second it.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Naidu.
Aye. Okay, moving on to resolutions. We have 5 resolutions from the finance. So Councilwoman Little, finance number 1.
Thank you, Council President. Finance Resolution 1 sets forth the summary of the 2019 revenues and appropriations, the 2019 municipal operating budget, 2019 sewer utility operating budget, and 2019 parking utility operating budget. I won't repeat my earlier comments. This is a budget that's been thoughtfully and carefully developed, and I ask that we approve this resolution to adopt these budgets.
Okay. And I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Second.
And since we already had a hearing on this, dispense, I think, would necessarily, we don't need another hearing. So roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Naidu.
Aye. Okay, moving on to finance number 2.
Thank you,
Councilwoman
Council
Little.
President. The resolution number 2 from Finance is the summary of the general revenues and appropriations for the 2019 Special Improvement District budget for the Summit Downtown, Inc., as we just heard, and I ask that we approve this resolution as well.
Second.
Okay, again, we had a hearing already on this, so now moving on to roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Naidu.
Aye. Okay, moving on, finance number 3, Councilwoman Little.
Thank you. Finance Resolution Number 3 is to concur in the 2019 Board of School Estimate certification of required funds. I would like to thank the members of the Board of School Estimate, Mayor Radist, Councilmember Fox, and Councilmember Gould, as well as Board of Education members Deb McCann and Chris Bonner for their careful attention to this budget. This was a budget that the whole community was very involved in giving input in throughout this process, and so I would also like to thank the Board of Education and Lou Pepe and Superintendent Chang, and I would ask that we approve this resolution.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? I don't know.
Which one?
Why don't we go?
Yeah. You know, while I understand the hard work that went into this, I am extremely disappointed that this increase is so high, and that we had to go into the cap. My other concern is the fact that when we had a little push against it, they were able to make the adjustment for class sizes in the various class or schools that they had people concerning with it. So, as much as I appreciate the hard work, I just am hesitant to support it fully in that we have to go into the cap.
Anyone else? Marjorie.
I'd like to say that I fully support this budget. I think that the Ops Committee of the Board of Education did a lot of work trying to make this as tight a budget as they could. It's a difficult situation when you need to add teachers. There's really no way to avoid increases in expenses. The major expense here, or the only expense really, in creating full-day kindergarten is adding teachers for those classrooms. The other part of the budget that it wasn't solely full-day kindergarten that caused that increase. Some of that was insurance and the benefits, which we all struggle with, both in the city and on the Board of Education side. So I think it's not fair to pin this all on full-day kindergarten. The other thing I'd like to point out is that I think there was what Councilman Bowman said about finding money for to address class size. That's a process that goes on every year, and it was no different this year. It just was sort of exacerbated by the full-day kindergarten discussion, and the two were linked when they really shouldn't have been. In a sense, every year there is an initial class size, there's an initial breakdown of what the sectioning is going to look like. The class sizes are then, it's kind of a moving target. Kids come, they go, and really it doesn't happen till the end of this summer that sections are finalized. And there is, at the same time, there is breakage. Teachers retire, paid teachers retire, new teachers are hired at a lesser salary. So there's money that's available there. It's not just a magical thing that it happened. This happens every year, and I just want to clarify that so there's no implication that money was somehow found. This happens every year with the class sizes. And just to reiterate, I think this full-day kindergarten is a great thing for this community, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mike.
Yeah, I too have some issues with this budget. As far as process goes, I think Board of Ed outgoing President Deb McCann, her comments at the Board of School Estimates really do speak for themselves. I mean, if you actually listen to what she said, it was a withering critique of the process on how to go about basically making decisions about what to spend on the budget. She said, one of the things she said, beyond how FDK was decided, which that horse has been beaten enough. But she said around spending the money, there are so many competing factors for your school budget. Plus, issues that you have to contend with going forward, like the fact that there's no further kick-in for health care benefits from teachers. New Providence teachers still don't have a contract because that's what they're fighting about. And her comment basically said there was zero, debate about comparative discussions on what to spend money on, particularly stressing the issues that they're going to be facing going forward. And again, regardless of what your view is on FDK, because I agree this is not just about FDK, there's absolutely no reason to be over a 2% cap. When we talk about voting on caps, it gets introduced as something that it should be for emergency use or unforeseen circumstances. I think that was a quote that was done when this was introduced at the city last month. FDK, we've been talking about this for 6 or 7 years. This is not an emergency. It's not a surprise. It's not unforeseen. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to debate whether or not this makes sense in the context of your larger budget. And if it's the best thing since sliced bread, then figure out what you're going to cut to stay below the 2% cap. That's just the way budgeting should go. You don't just get a freebie to say, oh, we like this too. Let's break the cap to do it. That's not doing the hard work to safeguard, taxpayers' money. The smaller class size, again, that clearly there were a lot of people who were all in favor of that. The euphemism for adding sections is great, but that's extra teachers. The one thing that, remember, part of the debate about FDK was that they were going to have less teachers that were going to be gone from attrition. They could use those teachers in order to fill FDK spots. So there was this thought that it was only going to cost $1.1 million when it really cost $1.5 because of that. The original estimate was to go down teachers outside of FDK. Now they're talking about adding 8 or 9 to the elementary schools for these extra sections. I'm sorry, that is a big change. When you're normally talking about this kind of stuff, you're talking about 1 or 2 teachers here or there. You're not talking about a swing from down 4 to, if you include FDK, now you're talking about up double digits. That's a big difference, a big, big difference, and needs to be fully vetted in a budgetary process, not just being added on because a bunch of parents got up and probably quite rightly were concerned about class sizes. They need to go back and discuss that, and for full transparency, say what that's going to do. We already had a comment today about staff in the municipal budget. Staff is expensive because it adds to pension costs. It adds to healthcare costs. These things need to be fully vetted. That's a big, big difference, and that didn't happen with this budget. We have a duty to safeguard all citizens' interests. I think it was 9 years ago, I think it was 2010, current council president Rich Madden's Common Council showed real leadership. The school budget in that year came in above the cap. Remember, we were in a recession. It was a big deal. They took real leadership because they said, you can't do this. You're tone deaf to what's going on, financially in the community. They voted no in this process. It went back to the Board of Ed, and they cut $300,000 from the budget to get it below the cap. That's real leadership. That's showing what elected officials should do when our appointed board goes off the rails somewhat. One thing I know that they can use the cap, but past fiscal retenance is no excuse for exceeding the cap. When I was listening to all this debate, I was just dismayed about how so many Board of Ed members seem to think that any amount of money in years past, up to 2%, was really theirs. That, hey, we could have spent your 2%, but we didn't. Now it's here for us to use going forward. No, it's not. That's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money. And that's the difference. You're supposed to go there and figure out how you can deliver the best services without taking somebody else's money. And the attitude I saw up on the Board of Ed was, the cap's there to use. Aren't we great because we banked 10 million of, over the past 9 years. Not a big deal, but it is a big deal. You should be spending money below the cap. One other note. We have been complaining for years about the county. And how the county uses every, loophole around carving out their debt payments or health care payments to exceed the 2% cap. Every year we get up here and we complain and complain and complain about it. And one of the things we say, well, we can't really do anything about it. We're going to talk to them. We'll try and do something about it. It's ironic. The county's budget is lower now than the school budget. Yet we can do something about this. We can tell the Board of Ed to go back and sharpen their pencils and get below the 2% cap. If we don't, then we are complicit in them breaking the cap. It might as well break the municipal cap. It's the same thing. We are elected officials, and we can say no, and we should. I already touched on transparency. As I said, this is a big deal. We're talking about all these additions. It should be vetted in the public. It should be vetted against, that kind of money going forward versus the cost of full-day kinder going forward. Make the comparison. Make the comparison against other programs. That's what you should be doing. I'm going to say, this is an easy no vote for me. Again, it's more around process. I have opinions on full-day kindergarten, but it's really about the budget process and breaking the cap. And, I didn't run for office promoting a school program. I just didn't. When I talk to people, I promise to be really sensitive to the incredibly high costs of living in New Jersey and to do my best to try and spend other people's money wisely. And so they know what's going on. And I think the municipal budget this year has really done that. So I applaud the Finance Committee. I get that the BOE works hard. They're volunteers. They have a hard job. I think it's a harder job than being a common council member. So I applaud them. But again, they need to work a little harder. They need to go back and sharpen their pencils and figure out how to get this below 2%. We're better than this. We could talk a lot of different ways around ways to save money. They should do the hard work to do it. That's my comments.
Thank you, Mike. Beth?
I'm just going to take exception to a couple things that Councilman McTiernan said. And one was that the costs hadn't been vetted or considered by the Board of Education. I attended every Board of Education meeting, or most of them, concerning this issue, and there were really hours of comments by the public, both for and against. There were many, many hours spent in the operations meetings. There were many hours spent with Lou Pepe and Superintendent Chang going over these costs. I've talked to the Board of Education members individually. To say that these costs hadn't been vetted or considered or compared is really, I think, unfair to the Board of Education members and to Lou Pepe and June Chang. I think there are a tremendous amount of thought and effort and consideration and listening and input from the public went into this whole process. Also that the Board of Ed was, there was an implication that there was tone deafness from the public, and I've also spoken to them about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails they received, and all of which were read, I know, by both our Board of School Estimate members as well as the Board of Education members, and as well as listening to the public through hours of testimony. And lots of people from this community made their views known and were listened to by the Board of Education. To say they're tone deaf or didn't carefully vet this process, I think is unfair. So I'm going to take exception to that. This budget, I think, is very forward thinking, and it's an investment in our community. And one of the reasons that it's going, that there is a larger expense this year is because we are losing the revenues that were previously charged for the kindergarten program. And in my view, charging for public school program and having a situation where your ability to pay dictates what type of education you get in a public school program is not correct. So in that measure alone, I think we needed to lose that revenue. That's where we're taking the hit this year, and that's why I would be in favor of this budget going over the cap. But I know that a lot of hard work went into this. I know that a lot of careful thought went into this, both in class size, in staffing, in all the different aspects. I know that it happens every year. I sat on the Board of School Estimates last year. I saw the process from the inside, and I do think it's unfair to characterize it that way, and I want to state that.
Thank you, Beth. Hold on. Matt?
Thank you, Council President. I would say that I support this budget. I looked at it very closely over the months. I just want to say a couple things. I know that tuition-based full-day kindergarten was a compromise position when it was adopted 5 years ago, mainly, I believe, because the council blocked it back then. But we've ended in a scenario now where we've created institutional inequality because we're charging people to send their kids to public school. Beth alluded to this, but as I mentioned at the Board of School Estimate meeting, it's called a revenue funding cliff. I'm sure you know, where we were taking in revenue for something that I don't believe we should have been taking money in for that purpose. And so to me, the only two options would be either get rid of the full-day kindergarten program altogether or to make it universal and free for all residents. And with those two options, we know that 84% of our residents that have the choice to choose full-day kindergarten do, and therefore we believe our residents want it. So it's our only choice but to go forward with this budget. And I say it like that, but I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it that we're righting a wrong, and I'm excited that we're investing in our future.
Thank you, Matt. Mike?
Yeah, the process, I didn't describe the process. Council or BOE President Deb McCann described the process. She was incredibly critical of the process and how there was no comparative discussion about, well, if you're going to want this, this is great. What do you offset to pay for it? There was none of that. And that's her words, not mine. So you may take exception, but then take exception to those words. My tone-deaf comment, I'm not talking about people's willingness to support or not FDK. I'm not debating whether FDK is a good program or not. I could do that. But my question really is, if you want it, compare it to something that you're willing to give up or to shave to get under the 2% cap. I didn't sit in on the operating committee meetings. The way Deb McCann spoke about it didn't seem like that was going on a lot. Because my personal view is if you had to do that, you probably would have a very difficult time cutting anything to advocate for FDK with all the issues that it has around our own populace. But that being said, that's not my call. I had my say on what I thought about the program, but what I can say is get it under the 2%. That's what they should do. There's a revenue cliff because it was an artful compromise on how to get other people to subsidize other people's ability to go to FDK. Now, you can argue whether it was right or not, but there was a program in place, and you need to deal with changing that program. You just do. And so, again, I'm going off, I wasn't in on the operating committee meeting. No one up here was in on operating committee meetings. But when as I said, it didn't sound like the process was very great. And if they want FDK, fantastic. But do it in a budgetary responsible way. That's my point.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else? Council. I have a couple of comments, but I'll hold off. I want to hear from the public. Are there members of the public that want to speak on this issue? Okay. See, no discussion about members of the public. Here's my thoughts. I'm not going to comment on the Board of Education process, and I believe that was there was meetings held for the public back last year on this issue. As Councilwoman Little said, I will personally say I did not attend all of those meetings. I think most of them my wife did, though. But I will say, from what I understand, and having watched them, they were thoroughly attended well. There was lots of public debate about this. But the issue, to Councilman McTiernan's point of saying, no, send it back, and you guys figure out a way of cutting, that doesn't work for me. And the reason that doesn't work for me is because we should, if we're going to say no to something, we should have a pretty darn good idea what it is that we expect them to do. Simply saying, I'm just going to kick the ball to you, you come up with I want a number below 2%. I don't care how you achieve that 2%. You can cut it in sports, you can cut it in academics, you can cut it in full-day kindergarten. Just give me the number. That's not the way that one should do education. It's too serious a topic to go ahead and put a number out there and say, meet that number. We're not talking about making widgets, okay? We're talking about the education of our children. And you simply can't say, find out, okay, why don't you cut the art program? Why don't you cut out the music program? Why don't you cut out the football program, the lacrosse program? We're going to achieve those things. Is that the best thing for the community? When there is a process, we go ahead, we do the process. And I don't know what President McCann, as the school board president, how she handled the process. You know, as a person, you had the gavel, I have the gavel here. Now, we have some appreciation of the need to figure out consensus among members, have some appreciation how to work with the administration. That's part of your responsibility. And so if she doesn't like the process that she was leading, I don't know what to say about that. That wasn't the process. We weren't involved in that process. She should know how she should be leading the process to get the results that she wanted to see in that process. Maybe not the result that she got, but maybe the process that she wanted. So that's all I can say about that. And mind you, that's saying as a person who really likes Deb and knows. I have known Deb since basically she moved into Summit, since she and I were neighbors when she first moved into Summit. So that's not derogatory towards Deb. It's just saying, I don't know how that process was done. Hopefully she can live with that process. But we simply cannot, I think, as council, simply say, kick the can to somebody else and say, hey, you figure out what that number should be and what we're going to cut. That to me is not fair to them. They went through a process. It's now incumbent upon us to decide whether or not, after a long and lengthy and deliberate process where the public was involved in every step of the way and had the opportunity, mind you, that's the other thing, the public had the opportunity along the way to be involved. We've come up to a result. It's incumbent upon us to move this forward. Okay? With that, let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, abstention? Steve and Mike. Okay, moving on. Finance, number 4.
Thank you, Council President. The Finance Resolution number 4 is to authorize a 2019 salaries effective January 1st, 2019. And this is to authorize a salary increase for several police officers due to a reevaluation of the date the officers were due their longevity increases. So I would ask that we approve this resolution.
Second.
Okay, any discussion by members of council? Any comments or questions by members of the public? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to finance number 5.
Thank you, Council President. Finance Resolution number 5 is to authorize 2019 salaries effective May 7th, 2019. And this resolution is to authorize a salary increase for a DCS employee who's being promoted from truck driver in the roads unit to equipment operator in the maintenance unit. And I ask that we approve this resolution as well.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? Any comments or questions from members of the public? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Law and labor. Steve, we have one of them. Because
I
the other one
do.
was withdrawn.
Thank you, Council President. This, as we discussed, or labor number 6389 is to declare a vacancy for the Department of Community Services Division of Public Works. As we discussed in closed session, we have a maintenance worker in the garbage and trash crew who has decided to pursue other career and opportunities, and we are declaring a vacancy for that role. I move we accept this resolution.
Anybody want
Beth?
to second?
Second that?
Beth?
Oh,
Any
second, I'm
that?
sorry. I thought I was
Okay,
done with my whole
You
long
thought you were
list of
done.
resolutions and hearings.
Okay.
I apologize. I second.
Yeah. Any comments or questions from members of council? Any comments or questions from members of the public? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Community programs. Matt, you have one.
Thank you, Council President. This resolution number 6425 is to accept a donation of $10,000 from an anonymous donor to be used for the purchase of new Rydell SpeedFlex youth helmets with Insight impact response system built in. Mark Ozorowski, head of community programs, and I had a long talk about this because, as we've all seen, football has been a hot topic lately. Summit has a proud football tradition of 125 years. We've taken a lot of steps to improve the safety in this regard. These helmets are a big step in that. They have sensors in them that measure the impact and strength of the impact to all the hits to the head. Coaches and med staff can see the results in real time on the sidelines, and if there's a hard hit, they have to take the child off the program. This donation is enough to buy these great helmets for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, the whole community programs continuum, and there were 0 concussions last year. Furthermore, participation is starting to rise again for football, and I think that's because of the active safety measures that our community's been taking.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from members of council? Mike?
Yeah, I know last year, at the high school level, they had, I think parents got together and raised money for new helmets as well. So clearly people in our community care about safety. It's nice to see outside money being raised to support things like this, that people are willing to give money for important stuff. And, football is probably not going away for a while, so I think it's incumbent that our kids play it as safely as possible. So I think this is great.
I will say that I agree with that I don't think football is going away in a while, and I agree with the idea that we need safety. I will also say that there's more and more research. There's just recently a research from Boston University about CTE, and it concerns me a great deal. And you see the study, I know one can say, well, it's picking on the dependent variable because they have only certain people who go in and give samples for MRI scans and so forth, and so therefore maybe you're not getting a full result. But you had professional football players at 99% who had evidence of CTE, college at nearly 90%, high school at 21% or so. This is concerning, and we cannot simply, we need to keep track of what's going on. There's only so many things one can do with safety. One has to recognize, if you think about the other sports that are played in town, whether it's soccer, lacrosse, tennis, any other sport, there are no medical staff that are by the sidelines. There's a reason for that. There are 2 medical staff when we have high school football. There's a difference. We have to appreciate the fact that this safety can only go so far. At least that's my opinion. And we have to think about this. But I'm not going to certainly do anything not to support getting as much safe equipment while we still have these programs. Steve?
One quick question. I agree 100% with everything you say. The one thing, I guess, question is, the other thing especially in this level, I hope we are teaching our players how to block and tackle properly. An awful lot of it is technique, and protective equipment will protect you, but technique will also is vitally important in that process. So, Mark, I hope we are.
Mark, do you want to come
Actually,
up?
I'd like to have Mark. Mark has a
come
lot
on
of
up.
information about this.
Steve, to answer your question, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Kevin Fagan, who's our Director of Football Operations. He does a fantastic job as far as teaching the fundamentals, the skills of the sport, and keeping everybody safe. That is our #1 priority. Every single one of our coaches is certified in heads-up tackling. Back when Kevin and a lot of our coaches played, it was putting your head down and tackling. Now everybody, when they make a tackle, their head is up and they're wrapping. So every single one of our coaches is certified in that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is
Any, while I'm up here, any other
Yeah, does anybody
questions
else have a
regarding?
question for Mark while he's up
Yes.
there?
One thing we discussed was with the new technology of these helmets with the heads-up tackling, and at the age group that our program covers, the risk of head injury is quite small, is it not?
Yes, it's very low. And even with, last year, our 7th and 8th graders had these helmets. 90% were low impact. We had nobody, there was never a warning sign for an alert where we had to take a kid out of the game. So it just kind of shows, from that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. The game is changing to fit the information. That's my belief.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. Did I ask for any comments from the public? If I haven't, any members of the public want to come up and give a comment? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on. Safety and health. We have one. Greg.
Thank you, Council President. Safety and Health Resolution number 6397 appoints a volunteer firefighter. The candidate, James Hintz, has met all the requirements for membership in the volunteer division. I move this resolution.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? Any comments or questions from members of the public? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now moving on. Council member comments and new business. Are there any council members that have any comments or new business? Okay, I'll take the silence to mean that everyone's willing to entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.